Good evening. Welcome to Perspectives with Asima Silva. We have a great show for you today. We have our guest. His name is Wafic Faour, who is from Vermont, and he is part of Vermonters for Justice in Palestine. And the reason why I invited him over is, as you know, we've had Dr. Slaughterhouse, Dr. Bill, who's been on our show multiple times talking about his experience in the Palestinian Gaza Strip in Palestine regarding mental health when he goes and volunteers there for mental health purposes. He referred me to this group and said, you really need to talk to them about some of the work they have done. So I'd like to welcome our guest for today. He is joining us on Zoom. We're still in the COVID environment. And thank you for joining us. We've been trying to get you guys on for a while, so it's lucky that we finally got a great time for you guys to join us. Can you please introduce yourself, and then if you can just take us a minute to the organization you're with and the topic that we're going to be talking about today.
Thank you, Asima, and thank you for WCCA TV for your invitation. My name is Wafic Faour. I'm a member of Vermonters for Justice in Palestine. I am Palestinian born refugee in Lebanon, and I live now in Richmond, Vermont. To talk a little bit about our work here, majority of our work was, our organization is almost over 20 years old. Majority of our work is education to our American public here about the question of Palestine, and opening the eyes of our neighbors and our American citizens to the violation of the human rights of the Palestinians under occupation and in the refugee camp. Part of this education methods we adopted over 10 years ago, what we call BDS, boycott, divestment, and sanction. It is the boycott. We use it as a tool to put the pressure on Israel to stop the violation of human rights and equal rights for the Palestinian. We used it because it was a successful tools have been used on South Africa as much as have been used here in the United States. The boycott or divestment, it is as American as apple pie. If anybody reads American history, will understand that the Tea Party in the harbor of Boston on your state started, I believe, around 1687 by throwing the tea on the harbor because the citizens of Boston and Massachusetts refused to pay taxes to the colonizing power, the English crown. So it is American, it is legal, and have been used by our siblings, sisters, and brothers on the civil rights movement during the 60s, the lunch counters, as you remember, to put the pressure to bring the racist, the racist treatment of the black people on black only, white only places, and on the boycott of the buses as well. Now, what we are facing, we called 10 years ago to boycott Ben & Jerry because it is against the international law and Geneva Convention to benefit and profit from the occupation. Ben & Jerry opened their factory on Israel on the late 1978. It was the first factory have been built outside of Vermont. And they sell their product on a Jewish-only settlements that built illegally on Palestinian land, and using resources, water, land, etc., have been confiscated from the Palestinian citizen by Israeli forces. We contacted Ben & Jerry executive and board of directors and we negotiated with them for over 10 years. They promised us to go over there and educate themselves about the situation over there. At least to our knowledge, they went for more than 3 trips. And the head of Ben & Jerry board of directors, Jeff Fairman, described the situation as apartheid. Apartheid similar to South Africa, where people, Jewish people, white settlers have been treated under different system than the Palestinian citizen of Israel and Palestinian under direct occupation in West Bank and Gaza Strip. When we asked them they have to divest their business, they slammed the door in our face many times. At one point, they said, we're going to start buying a product from Palestinian farmers like almond. But we informed them that our purpose is to put the pressure on the Israeli occupation, not improve or throw money to the Palestinians as a token, to accept the occupation and the daily humiliation that they face on the checkpoints, on their education system, health system, and the daily life.
So let me just recap, because I'd like our viewers to follow what you're saying. Growing up, Ben & Jerry's was like a staple place to go for ice cream. I would never have thought about this as a background. And you're saying that in 1978, they built a first factory outside of Vermont. Is that correct?
Yes.
And why did they choose like occupied lands to build their factory? And I guess that leads to the second question is, if this was back in 1978, why has it taken this long for them to educate themselves about the apartheid situation in Palestine, Israel?
Both are a great question. According to Ben & Jerry, that they built up that factory in Israel because of a meeting between Ben Cohen, Jerry Greenfield, the founder of Ben & Jerry in 1978, with an Israeli businessman by the name of Avi Zinger on Bar Mitzvah party, and they made that decision that to open the factory over there. Why some company with Ben & Jerry status, which is they have a social mission, love and peace, and they pride themselves of respecting human rights, didn't educate themselves until now, this moment, we still puzzled about it. Because when I asked Jerry Greenfield just about 3 months ago on a meeting if he has been there, he said the last time he has been there 5 years ago. I asked him if he met Palestinians over there. His answer was negative. If he visited the occupied Palestinian territory in 1967, his answer was negative too. I asked him if he visited Palestinian Arab in Israel, 1948, where my family came from Upper Galilee, and his answer was negative. So it is only personal relationship. They kept them over there. And that's why we found them as the target worth to struggle after, because Ben & Jerry are conscientious about many issues. So you will find them up front and center on issues like race, police brutality, Native Indigenous people, and water struggle. They were part of Occupy Wall Street. They stand against the Southern Wall that prevents our migrants to come to the U.S. So they were conscientious on every matter, any one of us on the progressive movement and social and racial justice movement pride ourselves with. But when it comes to Palestine, they close their eyes and ears about that.
So after you approached them, how many years did it take for them to agree to start educating themselves and look into the matter?
After 2 years of our meeting, they sent the first group of executive over there and board members. Because the CEO, Solheim, have been removed, the new executive came in, Matthew McCarthy. He went over there, and the new head of the board, Anirata Mattal, went over there. The thing puzzled us too when we saw McCarthy on a picture had been published on the Guardian magazine with settlers business people, and this is what made us push more. Not every time we ask them for a meeting, they obliged to the meeting. What happened lately on May 15, after a major rally we have on solidarity with the Palestinian people under bombardment in Gaza and 77 children getting killed, a group of people and other organizations beside the VTJP, Vermonters for Justice in Palestine, called Decolonize Burlington. They joined our effort, and they put the campaign on Instagram, Twitter, and all these electronic tools that pushed Ben and Jerry within 3 days to go silent on their social tools too. And it took them 62 days after to come with a statement. And the statement very clear, it says doing business on Palestine, Israel, will end by the end of year 2022. And we are watching. You have to understand, Ben & Jerry is owned by another company called Unilever. And Unilever insisted that they're going to continue business with Israel. So we are watching what's the outcome and how clear their statement going to be. And we'll see what to do. But BDS, boycott, divestment, sanction, is a tool that we're going to bring that American money going toward Israel. It doesn't serve what American stands for, you know,
right.
And it was an effective tool. And we hope we can educate the public here and force our politicians to stop sending $3.8 billion annually to Israel that doesn't recognize Palestinian human rights and equal rights. We have struggled with 35 states that they activated laws, state laws. They made BDS illegal, and they called it antisemitic. And this is another struggle we have, and we have to fight it, because the right of BDS, the right of boycott, divestment, sanctions, it's enshrined in our First Amendment. And to be selective to choose the Palestinian issue of human rights and equal rights is against the American law, is disappointing.
So do you think because Ben & Jerry's was founded in Vermont, and we know that Vermont, you know, with Bernie Sanders and his stance on Israel and Palestine, I guess my question is, what if it was a different state? Do you think you would have gotten, if Ben & Jerry's was in a different state other than Vermont, do you think you would have gotten the same feedback and reception and reaction to your cause?
Well, we did our research very well. Ben & Jerry is not only a company with ice cream with different flavors. They have a social mission with different flavors. And because we respect that mission, the social mission that they pride themselves with, if it's existed in any other states, with the full research and effective campaign, absolutely, yes, we can win, regardless if it's Vermont, Massachusetts.
In that case, have you identified other companies to do a similar campaign?
There are the BDS movement. They are concentrating now on General Mills and Haagen-Dazs ice cream and Pillsbury product. There is another company, Puma, the sport outfits. It's another company that they have similar missions, but not the same as Ben & Jerry. But I think campaign like this, a public campaign, can be effective because at the end, it's the economy. And this is what factored within the South African campaign, as we know. America, United States, came late to anti-apartheid movement in South Africa. When they recognized it, it was effective. I mean, in Europe, BDS movement is stronger than here, and they are removing a lot of Israeli product from the shelves. And if it wasn't effective, Israel wouldn't put millions and millions of dollars to fight it. They wouldn't go, their council generals, flying all over the United States to create laws against it. So I believe it is. And it's existed the intellectual boycott too in the universities and campuses. It's very strong, and it will bring the subject up front and center onto the table that the debate has to do.
If people want to find out more information about this campaign, where can they look at your organization? Where can they find out more information about volunteering or finding out more information what your organization is doing?
They can contact us on VTJP.org. It stands for Vermonters for Justice in Palestine. And they can get more information. They can learn, educate themselves. If they need help from us to educate them how the campaign can be run and be effective, we are ready to help.
So you're in Vermont. When you talk about this topic, how is it received? Is it a topic that makes people pause, or is it something that people are interested in talking about and learning?
When we started the campaign, you're right, Asima, that people will pause. They say, the reaction at the beginning was, you don't want the Israeli to eat ice cream, or you're against, The idea is not ice cream or the product. The idea is what's behind the profit and the benefit. But as we went leafleting year after year, on a frequent day, majority in the front of Ben & Jerry outlets, we discovered that the people are perceptive. Things are changing on the question of Palestine. Definitely, the Zionist or pro-Israel, they are adamant to call it anti-Semitic campaign, to call BDS as an anti-Semitic movement. But majority of our supporters, I cannot say majority, but a lot of our supporters are from the Jewish faith, and they are very active on this campaign.
Right. And that was one thing I'm glad you mentioned, is that BDS is not just about Palestinians or Muslims or Arabs against Israelis or Jews. There's a lot of Jewish people that do support BDS and that speak out. So my question to you is, when people say to you, this is an anti-Semitic campaign, how do you go about explaining to them the difference between what you're trying to do and what is anti-Semitic? The reason why I'm asking is I feel that in this country, anti-Semitic is very general, it's very broad, and it's not completely understood in the right manner. So how do you approach it?
Not only on Ben & Jerry and BDS, we've been called anti-Semitic. Recently, we introduced a resolution for Palestinian human rights, equal rights, and the right of BDS in the city of Burlington. And we have been attacked not only from local Zionists, but ADL, Anti-Defamation League, and ICANN, major Israeli lobby groups, they joined against that resolution. And it was just recently, it was the hearing September 13. The anti-Semitic becoming label that the Zionists use generally for anything they disagree with. And they are putting any criticism of Israel, it's equivalent to anti-Jewish, equal anti-Semitic. I am afraid, and I talk to many Jewish friends and supporters, I'm afraid by using it on this way, it will become at one point like the boy who cried wolves, when the anti-Semites and the anti-Jews do work, which is 100% of anti-Jewish activities coming from white supremacists. So when they will hurt our Jewish siblings, some people not going to listen because they are using it left and right with no consideration to the outcome and the future. This is one. Two, if they say it to me, I'm Palestinian Arab, I'm Semitic myself. Anti-Semitic is a European term for European actions happened against the Jews on the last 300, 400 years, you know. And if there is racism against the Jews, it is the white supremacy mentality created it, not the Palestinian Arab or Muslim world created it. The Jews, Arab Jews or non-Arab Jews, they have been protected by the Muslim world and the Arab world when every European country pushed them out. It's a historical fact, and this is, we have to teach history as it happened.
So what's your next campaign now that you've had a little bit of a victory with Ben and Jerry's, and you said you'd keep an eye on some of their efforts moving forward? What's in the works now with your organization?
We're working with other groups to study, and not only groups, but ACLU and the National Lawyer Guilds to understand the legality of the anti-BDS laws, because we are like any other states. We saw the Israeli Consul General come and visit our Attorney General, TJ Donovan, over here, and we saw their pictures, and we heard just less than 4 weeks ago that he's going to go and visit Israel. Usually this is lobbying way to bring people over there and to push them to create laws against Palestinian solidarity activists. So we have to create some kind of movement to stop these kind of actions and to protect our activists and protect the right of the First Amendment, that we can use it.
So when these politicians visit Israel, are they not allowed to see, like, the Arab Palestinians, the non-Jewish, people living under Israel and how they are treated in this apartheid state? Are they not allowed to see, or are they given a different version of what Israel is?
If the inviting party is the Israeli government, they don't want you to see what's happening on the Palestinian community and how the racism taking places, not only to the Palestinian under occupation or on the open air prison like Gaza. They will take you to Tel Aviv, to touristy place, to show you Israel as another Western country with another Western cultural. With Western people, practically American settlers going and living over there. They're not going to show you the suffering of the Palestinian children or the Palestinian with Israeli citizenship who are discriminated against on every aspects of life, on the Justice Department and policing, to education, to healthcare, to housing. they don't want any visitor to see that reality. The discrimination over there is overwhelming, and you can read about it in a Human Rights Watch documents or Israeli human rights organization called B'Tselem. We are not making up the story. So if one politician or senator or congressman go and visit over there, it doesn't mean that they're going to take them to the Palestinian neighborhood, which is behind the wall practically on the West Bank. Only they're going to fly you over it and show you how close between the Mediterranean Sea and Jordan River. And they say, oh, we are scared from the Arabs that they're going to take over. And usually through that, they are gaining sympathy within our politicians, and they come and they give them all the support. Last week, they gave them $1 extra billion for the Iron Dome. There is no check and balance to what Israel do with our American tax money.
Do you have any last thoughts, final thoughts before we end our show that you would like to share with us?
Thank you, Asima. I appreciate it. There is a New England network existed where on all 6 states of New England, we have November 29th, the International Day of Solidarity with the Palestinian people. Look at Organization and Solidarity of Palestine in your area. We are sending petitions to ask our politicians to stop sending money to Israel, because it's harming the people of Palestine. Thank you.
Thank you. I can see that was really hard emotionally for you to say that. But thank you so much for sharing your thoughts with us today. And I will start finishing up and wrapping up. And usually, as usual, I will share with you my thoughts. And as Wafic was talking, all I could think about towards the end was when he was talking about when politicians or people of certain power visit Israel, they're given this particular image of certain cities and certain places. And as he was talking about that, all I could think about was my childhood experience of watching Wizard of Oz, and that final scene where Dorothy looks behind the curtain to see the truth of who was behind it all. So that's what I would ask every one of you to do, and all our politicians to do, is to look behind the curtain of all issues and then make up your mind on which side you're on. So thank you again for joining us on Perspectives with Asima Silva.